that off, and whilst we wait for everyone else, I'm just going to play the song through. So let's hope that we get some more people joining. Enjoy the song by Evol. All right, we're back. So I hope you enjoyed that little mix demo there for a bit. Have we got everyone back? We only got kind of half the people back. That's a shame. Anywho, nice to see you there, Nokine. Cool. Let's see how we roll. Okay, so that's so disappointing. Them's the breaks. Anyway, okay, so what I wanted to do now, I'm gonna just let's go back to where we were. Again, obviously, as always, please throw me the questions, right? Okay, so this is a mixing webinar. So as I was saying, I want to talk about the way that I'm kind of approaching stuff, right? So we've done the kind of me playing my mix. Let's talk about the setup is the next thing. Okay, so again, I think people can kind of like think that analog setups and in the box setups are really different, but that's like really, really not the case for me. So and it helps me when I'm working in the box to kind of keep things into perspective, I guess. So for me, I really think about, I like to subgroup most often when I'm doing things that are, the song like this has got a lot of stacked vocals. It has a lot of kind of stereo. I mean, it's not that massive. It's a manageable song, but it has actually for Evolve, this only has 4 rhythm tracks, but normally we would have quite a live drums as well. But so for me, it helps to use subgroups. Now, there's a few ways that I go about doing this. Sometimes I would do like subgroups is in using the matrix and patching, and then I can do some subgroup compression and EQ and stuff like that. Or other times when I feel like I don't need that much control, I would use VCA masters. All right, so those of you who use Pro Tools is set up, it's modeled on this desk essentially, so it works in the same kind of way. Oh yeah, Amanda just said, actually, maybe you could do this, Karis. Pop the link to this video in the old video page, maybe in the comments. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of explain this a little bit. Maybe I can take this with me. This could be cool. I don't know how far I'll get. Anyway, I'll kind of take with me a little bit. Okay, so the way that I've approached this, so I've laid out my tracks on like basically they fit in 24 tracks, and then over here I have my I'm using VCA masters. So my subgroups are drums, and then I have bass, even though I kind of don't really need it. Probably drums and bass should have been on one VCA, but whatever. And then I have my synths, which is kind of like my ambient instruments, and then I have lead instruments, which is like the flute and the lead melody type stuff in my harmony instruments. And then I have vocals, because I have like 8 subgroups of vocals, and then I have an ambience VCA as well. Over on the right hand side of the board, I don't know if you can kind of really see it that far over to the right hand side, but that's where I have all of my returns for my effects. And the effects that I'm using today are, I've got a PCM 70, and I'll show you in a second, because I kind of can't take everything at once, but the effects that I'm using are PCM 70 for a kind of a hall sound. I kind of like it. It's a bit 80s, but it's also has a kind of epicness to it that I like. PCM 70 is not an expensive piece of kit. You get it for less than $600, I'd say. Then I have my all-time favorite, H3000. With the vocals, and I'm using that. The H3000 is really good because it has shifting capacities, and those of you, if we think back to Virginia's session yesterday, or what was it yesterday? Gosh, time is moving kind of slowly and fast at the same time. At Ginny's session, we were talking about sound toys, and she's talking about how much she loves the microshift. Sound toys, the people who started Sound Toys happen to have once worked at Eventide, so there's no mistake that the gear kind of sounds similar. Also, you can get Eventide H3000 emulations as well. Now, I'm going to say that they're not exactly the same quality as the hardware, but you get pretty close. And it's, again, as this is a kind of educational thing, don't wait until you get into a studio to learn about all this analog hardware. You can get access to it. I think the full Eventide anthology is like less than $500. These days there's all those licensing stuff that you can do, so get into it. So the H3000. Then I'm also using the Roland Chorus Echo, and I've got the Ursa Major, which I'm not sure if I actually patched that, but I had a plan to use that because I also love the Ursa Major. And then we're also using the Bricasti, which is a really famous reverb. So I'm just going to move off the mic, and I'll take the GoPro, and I'll give you a little bit of a blast of what these look like. Okay, so hopefully you can still hear me. I've actually got this as well, the TC2290. Can you see that? I've got on the rim shot and on the filter hat. It gives it a little bit of movement, which I wanted. So as I said, I'm using the Eventide H3000 SE, and this is set to multi-slap, and because I want it to be a really tight effect on the voice to kind of lift it above, because there's a lot of like whooshy, layery stuff, and so maybe someone has asked me a question about this, how to get the vocals short delays is the answer. Then we've got the Roland chorus echo space thing. It's wild and amazing. And then the Ursa down here, multi-tap digital delay and reverb. So that's what I'm using. And maybe I'll give you a bit of an example. Maybe I'll give you a bit of an example now about, you know, how these kind of work. Let's kind of see the A-B. Okay, so it was a bit hard to hear, was it? All right, so I was just letting you see the gear. So there's the TC990, a TC2290, which is on the rim. So I'll give you an example of that now. Damn. So yeah, microphone on. Okay, so as I was saying, what was I saying? Yeah, I was talking about why I used that. Okay, so the reason that I decided to do this is that I have space in the because there's only like 4 layers of percussion. So normally I would have kind of more stuff. But because I had that space, it was easy for me to think about adding some movement. Because if you have a lot of stuff, a lot of layers, adding more buzzes and bumps and delays and stuff can actually just make your track messier. So I think it's one of those things about figuring out what you're working with, right? So I had some space there. The other thing was that I also wanted to bring out this kind of dubby feeling a little bit. So I brought in the kind of feeling with that delay and then going into a reverb. Now, why did I use a PCM 70? Well, I could have used the chorus echo, which would be even more kind of that kind of warbly sound. But I found that it was too dirty and it made it kind of muddy and it didn't cut through because I still wanted to cut. So the PCM 70 has kind of got that 80s-y. It's a bit tighter and a bit cleaner, a bit more clinical. So that's why I went for that. That's why I went that direction. Okay. Now I've kind of derailed my organized talk slightly, but I guess I kind of got into talking about the delays a little bit. All of that, the excitement about the stream getting lost threw me off my organization. So, okay, what I was trying to do was to talk about the way that I set up in my routing. Okay, so I've got 24 tracks, then I've got VCA subgroups, and then I have 5 parallel effects. Now, that is a really common way that I approach my mixes. Another thing is like a lot of people have, particularly Ableton people, and no shade to Ableton, we love Ableton. But I mean, also Logic, everyone, all people. Less likely to happen with Pro Tools heads, but still. Millions and millions of delays and reverbs. And for me, again, it's an art, you do your thing. But from my perspective, it's too messy and I can't figure out what's going on. That's fine when you're doing production, but at some point you've got to kind of like have an idea and have a vision and figure it out. So for me, in a mix, I don't want to kind of have more than, maybe 5 spatial parallel stuff going on. Very occasionally I'd have more. Okay, now gain staging. So a few people have been asking me about gain staging, and it's a little hard to kind of demonstrate it here today, but in the middle of the desk there's VU meters, and I mean I've tried to demonstrate as much as I could, but I mean maybe I could turn this around. Maybe I will in a second. I'll take the GoPro with me for a little wander whilst I show you how I do the gain stage. But essentially, gain staging for me is making sure that my mix bus, the master out, however you think of it, is going to be hitting at 0 VU, which I calibrate to minus 16 dBFS RMS. Blah, right? So those of you who don't understand metering yet, I think now is the time. If you're interested in mixing, it's now the time to get a handle on that. If you want a document, I can send you a document that I put together to help people kind of understand this stuff. So let me know. So I set my VU to calibrate to that, and then I mix into that level. So with the gain stage. So then the other thing is to think about. So that's you probably can't see it, but that's the center board. And then I think about the level of my independent channels. Okay, so it's that I'm always working for the individual and the collective in the kind of context the way that I'm approaching my mix. Okay, so I'm going to turn my mic off and I'm going to play and I'm going to show you a little bit about how I gain stage. Okay, here we go. Okay, I don't know if that worked. But anyway, I was kind of trying to give you a little bit of a sense of how and what, what I'm thinking about and where I'm going. So I'm thinking about hopefully did you see the VU meter there in the middle board? So I want that to be hitting 0. I'm also mixing into a mix bus compressor that you might have heard. And then, I'm listening to the different levels and I'm using the trim knobs to adjust the gain of the individual tracks so that they are balancing correctly. Now, I did that obviously before I started doing the mix. I did this like straight up. So the thing that, how does this translate for you? Well, you bring in all of your tracks into a new document, you press play, all the faders should be 0, and then you look at the meters. So quite often, most often, and again, particularly with kind of modern DAWs and stuff, people don't know how to gain stage, and also people don't plug-in factories. It's a conspiracy thing, they make, because louder seems better, right? Quite often. So they make an automatic gain increase quite often in a lot of the stuff that they do. So we have this illusion that it sounds good. That ends, it might sound good, but it influences us. And what that means is that our mixes, our productions are really, really, really loud with no headroom. This is another reason, again, why thinking about analog processing can help you generally better in your DAW, because in analog context, red kind of means good. It's like you're getting some saturation and it's a nice place to be in. If respectfully, nice place to be in. In the digital world, red is a terrible, terrible place to be, and it makes everything sound like shit. So it also is an indicator that you're not giving yourself any headroom. So there's no breath, there's no life, there's no air in the music. And if there's no air in the music, this is me getting a bit esoteric here, but there's no access point for the listener. because there's sound, you want the sound to, the vibrations for people to kind of be in this vibrational experience. So there's no air. We can't kind of access it. And there's certainly some music, certainly more kind of hardcore techno and noise and stuff like that. But I still think that there needs to be kind of a concept of headroom, even if you only give it a little bit of air and then you take it away. Without this kind of context, people get bored. They can't get access to it and then they disengage. So I think it's really important. What else to say? Any questions? Any questions about gain stage? How do you gain stage? Let's get some feedback from you. Who doesn't gain stage? I didn't gain stage for many, many years until I finally, learned how to do it, I guess. So I'd be interested. Yeah. How do you approach it? Do you gain stage? Do you know about metering? Who uses a VU meter? Do you set your master bus? What do you mix to? What level do you mix to? There's a lot of confusion about that quite often. And who uses mix bus compression? That will be another question to throw out there. All right. Hang on a sec. Just went to my mails. I don't want to see that. Okay. So let's move on and let's see where we're at next. So here's just a little bit of a closer example. Hang on, let me get my face out of that. Okay, so here I've just shared with you my kind of plan for my setup. And you can see here in the way that I've set it up, I've been really specific about the effects that I want to use. And this is another thing that I want to talk about, which when I'm going into the next section, is about thinking about the conservation of your resources. So in the box, you can put 1 million 1176 compressors everywhere. In reality, in an analog studio, you probably have 2, if you're lucky. You know what I mean? So thinking about you have two 1176 and one distressor and one DBX 160 or whatever. So you start to think about, okay, how can I use these interestingly? And I think that, again, the other thing that happens in the box is people use one compressor all the time. People use one EQ all the time. And remember, these are kind of emulations, and you end up stacking up the sound of that one unit. And remember, in the analog world, no 2 units, even if they're 1176s, sound the same. So the way to get around that when you're mixing in the box, even with the most high-end like UAD stuff, don't just use 1176. Use DBX 160s and use distressors and use Fatsos and use tube techs and use the different colors and flavors to help stop that kind of build up of a certain sound. Yep. All right. And as I said, my mix bus. Today I'm using the SSL because it's the best in the world. I absolutely love it and thrilled that I can actually mix through a real one today. And then the Manly Massive Passive is my is some EQ on the master bus that I don't even know if I've turned it on. Let's see. Okay, so we got some questions there. So Spoke is saying, can you address, let's come back here. Can you address unity gain? I find it challenging when going back and forth from in the box to analog output gear. So, unity gain is the God, I'm losing my words here. Unity gain is the optimum operating kind of position, let's say, of typically analog gear, right? And what does that mean? So it's like the point at which the gear is going to be working at its best and to its fullest. If you have it under Unity, you are likely to introduce things like noise floor and other things. If you have it over Unity, you're likely to overdrive the circuitry and not get good results. So this is unity gain, right? Now, where is unity on different units is something that you need to read in the manuals. So I can tell you, for example, the 1176s, unity is at the 12 o'clock position. So at 21 and 24. Let me show you. Hang on a sec. I'm going to go change this to the GoPro one. Okay. Don't know if you can see this properly. Let's see. So here, for example, this, like that is considered unity. Okay, so at the 0 point. I have it slightly, you can see I'm using this one today, and I'm driving it slightly harder. Typical. I always drive things a bit harder. With the, you probably can't hear me that well. Let's just see if you heard that. But so with the distressor, I'm not going to show you because it's too hard to speak and to move. But with the distressor, I'll show you the distressor. Hang on a sec. Okay, so the distressor, I don't know if you saw that. The distressor, it's at 5 and 5 is what they say. Okay, you could hear better, cool. So yeah, the idea is that, these are the guidelines. So what does it mean with unity gain? Can I go above or below that? Yeah, of course you can, but with caution, so be aware of it. So the other thing is unity gain for the faders. So if we go to the other view here, now again, I don't have a close-up of this, I'm sorry, but with the faders, again, that each of those, many channels, however many is on this, 48 or something, each of those is a channel strip, right? So each of those channel strips it's got a preamp in it, then it's got a compressor, then it has EQ, et cetera, yada yada. So the compressor and the EQ don't kind of have input-output levels as they're driving through, but certainly the fader down the bottom has an ideal kind of position. That's called unity, and that's at 0. So most often, often with analog stuff, and particularly with meters, the 0 point is the good point. With digital, the 0 point is the kind of bad point, would I say? It's kind of hectic, the hectic point where things are getting wild. So, and what does that mean? So unity, as I said, it's maintaining the optimum kind of level or signal flow through that unit so that it sounds as good as it can. That's a guideline. So when you're in a digital kind of context, can you ignore unity? Kind of, yes, you can. If you're using digital plugins. If you're using emulations, no, you can't, because again, they've built in all of this information into the system, into the structure of using that unit, so it's an authentic experience, and including with that is things like unity. It's not as noticeable or as serious as with analog gear, but it's still certainly something like that. So my feeling about, to come back to that question about unity, is understand the kind of the unity position for a lot of the analog gear. And, when you're going to gain stage, you set everything to unity, and then you adjust by adjusting the trim, not the faders, to make sure that everything is balanced in the system before you start compressing, etc., yada, 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 right? That's the vibe. So for me, for example, I think that I have my compressor, my bass quite hot, and then I actually had my distressor was turned down a bit because I came too hot into it. Okay, so let's see where we're at with the chat questions there. Okay, so Sarah's saying, okay, hang on. First of all, I'm going to go to Maya. So should we get into mixing with the VU meter plugin on each channel strip or just the master? I mean, it's up to you. For me, just the master, because if I want to check in with, if you want to check in, sorry, I just saw Spoke's answer there. If you want to check in with an individual channel, just solo it and look at the VU meter on the master bus, right? So I only think you need one. And again, when I'm in the box, I want to keep it simple. I don't want to kind of overload myself with more things to look at and more things to set up and all that kind of stuff. So I will put a trim plugin on every of the first insert of all of my my channels. Another way you could do your gain stage would be to use change the level of the clips, right? So in Ableton, it's like clip gain. If you click on the detail view, with Logic, it's in the region view or something. It's a gain adjustment. And with Pro Tools, it's called clip gain automation. So either use the trim or do the clip gain automation to get it. I find the trim plugin is just easier for me personally. But that's how I do it. Okay, so Sarah's saying, is gain staging something to think about in a pre-mix before bouncing for the mix engineer? No, don't worry about it. That's the mix engineer's job. So you just do, and I mean, again, like probably the more you understand about mixing, the better gain staging you'll just naturally bring into your workflow as a producer, you know, and it's always, yeah, I mean, it just makes the job easier for the mix engineer at the end of the day. So, but I've got to say that this is another thing that I think is interesting to talk about. Okay, I'm just going to look at you all there, engage with the green dot. One of the things that is important to me, and particularly for people that work by themselves a lot, is because you're wearing lots of different hats. You're the artist, you're the engineer, you're the producer, and then you're the mix engineer. So you need to kind of have an understanding of what am I doing at different stages so you can focus on that job to the best of your ability. So when I'm producing, if I'm worrying about things like maximum impact, minimum voltage and gain stage and levels and peaks and clips, I'm not focusing on, is this music, has it got a character and is it unique and is the arrangement interesting and is the this and the that. Like I would prefer just to like be in that world and make something special and then get really particular and iron out all the details in the mix later, because that's then when I'm in my mix head, I've got to turn off my thing about is the arrangement good, could the lyrics have changed, is the vocal performance right. That's over. When I'm a mix engineer, I'm like, this is what I have. How can I make it awesome? And what can I bring up even more? And can I further enhance the inherent characteristics of this track? Other than that, my job is done, right? So that's, for me, I think it's important to delineate what you're doing when and know the different roles that you're playing. Yeah. Cool. All right. So let's get back to some more stuff. Okay. So I kind of did the gain stage demo. We'll move on from that. Now, talking about EQ and compression. As I've already said, maximum impact, minimum voltage. And, you know, it is a little bit harder to kind of demonstrate these things not over the desk. But as I said before, I need to think about how I can get the most out of the sound so that they're big in the mix, but they also leave space and room for each other. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the effects that I have for the kick and for the bass and solo that, because I know that a lot of the questions that people always have, but I know that some people have already been asking about how do you balance the low frequencies? So I'm going to talk a little bit, demonstrate a little bit about that and then talk about that. Okay. Okay, I just wanted to say something. So I just turned off the effects that I had, and the problem that I have here is that we've got a subby kick and a subby bass, and they're kind of in the way of each other. And so I need to make a decision here about how, what's going to go where, and kind of how to deal with it. So basically, this is my plan. I put the kick through the 1176 with 4:1 ratio. And then I put the bass through the distressor with a slightly higher ratio. And I introduced some harmonic distortion through driving and using the circuits of the distressor. Check it out. Read the manual. It's an amazing compressor. And then I also did a high pass filter on the input so that it didn't start working on the low frequencies that let it go. Check it out for more information. Read the manual to understand that if you don't. So I did that. And then I also thought about, okay, so I need to think about the EQ very much in this environment. So what I decided to do, I used the API 550 on the bass, and I really, really brought out 800 hertz. And then I also really, really, really brought out 2.5K on the bass to kind of bring the click a little bit more in. And then I did a boost at 50 hertz on the kick drum, and I cut out some information around 800 hertz on the kick drum to make way for the bass. Okay, so I'm going to do that now, demonstrate that now. Don't forget my microphone. Okay, so yeah, so I don't hope you could hear that. It's probably a little bit hard, but hopefully you're wearing headphones. But basically, this idea about pushing out the kind of upper mid range of the bass, and then leaving some space for the in the sub frequencies for the kick to kind of come through, is kind of balancing it out a bit. To be honest, I could probably do a little bit more work on the low frequencies there, but hopefully you get a little bit of an idea about some of the differences. Okay, any questions, as always, like let me know, right? Throw them in. Okay, so what else have we got? Now, there are a few things that I wanted to look at. Let me see. Oh, this ended up being quite small. But I did want to say one thing to, maybe I do this screen. I did want to kind of say about EQ and compression. It's obviously it's massive, right? To understand what compression does and to understand about EQ, it's a lot more than I can do in this, in the time that I have here. So I mean, sorry that this screen marked up a little bit, but I'll just say it to you. Really with EQ and compression, like research, there's so much information about all of these processes. The first place to start, and if you're a super geek like me, is to read the manuals. The Distressor manual is one of the best manuals I've ever read. It's really interesting. It's really detailed, and it's also explained in a way that's really good. So I learned some stuff about compression I didn't know before when I read that. So I think that being inquisitive and learning your tools, like these are the tools that you're learning. They're like your instruments as a mix engineer. So get inquisitive and like find out about how they work and explore the different options. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I want to share is that you need to have very, very, very good ears. So in order to get very, very, very good ears, you just need to train them. Like it's like anything else. Like, I mean, certain people have naturally good ears. That's obviously important. But aside from that, if you're not blessed with them, or maybe, this is something for me, is that if I haven't mixed for a while and I'm a bit rusty, I'll do some ear training before a session to make sure that I'm hearing things the way that I should be, just to kind of get me back up. So frequency training, like boop, and then go answer what frequency it is, 550 hertz or whatever it might be. And there's an app that I use a lot. I think it's just called Frequency. So, and I also, I teach mixing a lot, and I get all of my students to download that app and get busy with it pretty much. So do your research, start to learn about the tools, really understand the differences between different types of EQs and how they work and stuff. Really learn the differences between the different compressors, because there's different circuits and that they behave in different ways and you use them in different ways. Like you wouldn't use an LA2A on a really fast rap vocal, because it, does anyone want to give me the answers to why you wouldn't do that? Maybe I'll leave that out there. So knowing the different kinds of compressors that would be interesting and good for the job or for the idea that you have in your head, I think is really important. Then once you've researched, you've trained your ears, practice, and this is what we're talking about this week, and all of the mix engineers that have joined us and that I invited you to kind of be a part of the program. It's to mix, just mix. Get as many you can. There's another website online called Mixing Secrets, I think. It's like Mike Senior, who's an educator and an engineer, wrote a book, and then it's like Mix Secrets for the home studio or something. But he has a website that has it's a database, thousands and thousands of mixes with the multi-tracks for you to practice, but essentially. Well, not essentially, that's why they're there. So check them out. I mean, stylistically, you may or may not find the thing you're looking for, but it's somewhere to practice. Kick drum's a kick drum, right? You want to learn how to EQ it and compress it. Just start anywhere. Then once you've done that, what we're encouraging you to do this week is exchange music with each other. And for people, artists and producers here, that we're asking you to share your music, if you feel kind of attached to the track that you're working on at the moment, I'm sure you've got back catalogue, right? So let's just kind of get this community sharing thing happening so we can really practice and help each other improve our skills and our confidence. So those three things for EQ compression are really important to me: is research, train your ears, and practice. Okay. Okay, so this, can I make that bigger? I kind of can't. So I don't know, my little PowerPoint ruined itself a little bit. So, okay, so this is just some reflections on the things that I did in terms of the EQ approach to this mix. So I wanted the extra impact of using the 1176 on the kick, because it has, the fast transient to really bring out the kind of thud, by having, I have a pretty medium slow attack and a relatively fast release on there. Balancing the low frequencies, I've already said and I've already done. And then there were also some really unpleasant frequencies in the filter hat and the rim at around the kind of 3 kilohertz region and 1.25, I think it was, that I needed to take out. So it's just like hearing something that doesn't sound nice and fixing it, right? And one of the important things about this is as soon as you hear something that's unpleasant, don't ignore it, fix it, because the nature of our ears is such that if we keep on hearing something, like, has anyone managed to sleep when there's a siren going on all night? Or, I mean, maybe not, I don't know. But there are certain, or baby crying, I don't know, people, you learn to block certain things out. So if, same goes for this. If you listen to that click, click, click all the time and you don't change it, the ear goes, I guess there's nothing wrong with that, we'll just ignore it, right? So, that's important. That's also another reason that I should say about taking breaks, because when you take a break, you go out, refresh, and you come back in and your ears has kind of forgotten that it was ignoring that annoying thing, and you hear it again and you're like, oh, that's terrible. How did I not hear that before, right? So breaks is another thing that's very, very important when you're mixing, in addition to the fact that it's health and safety for and also for the longevity of your ears. Okay, so cleaning up the low mids is something that I did on quite a few parts, particularly in the synths and the vocals. In the areas where the kick and the bass are dominant, they're dominating that area. And so I can see when I kind of take out some of these low frequencies, if I can't hear them, that they've gone, well, they don't need to be there, right? So, and also what that does is gives me some more space for those low frequencies for the kick and bass to really live in that zone. So I'd do that as well. And then, of course, a high pass on the effects returns. All of the effects returns are high pass to not introduce rumble and things that we get from spatial processors back in. So these things are kind of, probably a lot of you know that stuff already. Okay, so again, I'm feeling a little bit lonely out here. So tell me, how do you approach what I'm saying? Is this all information? Is this kind of the way you do it? Let me know. All right. Okay, so we move to the fun, the fun part or the funner part, which is making sounds kind of come alive. I've talked a little bit about this already, as when I kind of derailed the conversation at the beginning and started to talk about the TC 2290 and what I did with the rim. So again, this is when it gets fun. This is when we can bring in these other sounds and spaces to start to make the song kind of move. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn off the ambience effects, and I'm going to kind of what I'll do is like a mini mix. So I'm going to imagine that I started from nothing, turn stuff off, level things up, bring in some EQ and compression, and then add some spatial stuff. So this will probably be about a 5-minute process. Okay. Throw in questions as you go, and comments. All right. Cool. Okay. So, I mean, I don't know if that was kind of interesting or not, but I kind of wanted to take you through the process of from the beginning for me in terms of I did like a quick version. So I'm going to start off by getting the levels right by thinking about how my foundation instruments are going into my mix bass and like getting the levels. So I did that, and then balancing stuff, getting the bass and the kick working together with EQ and compression, bringing in the other elements and really getting a sense for if they're working well together, and then bringing in my spatial and my dimension processes and processing. Cool. Okay, so I've got a few questions here. Okay, so what do we got? Aline is saying, I've heard that for electronic music, some people choose to cut all low frequencies off for all of the instruments except for the kick and the bass. What do you think about this? Is this actually a good strategy? I think that any type of simple rule is a bad strategy because it means you're not listening. So I think that, yes, often that can be something to do, but it should never be automatic. I mean, we can generally say, in the recording process anyway, you should always have a low cut or high pass on the vocals because of the artifacts that the recording process with the microphone and the noise floor and things like that introduces. So there are some general rules, but for example, before I took out the low frequencies, too much of the low frequencies in one of my vocal layers, and I could really hear that then, like quite obviously when I brought it back in, it just sounded tight and pinched, and that was because I was really aggressive with my low pass. So yes, you should probably pass things that are not the kick and the bass, but be aware of it. Like listen and think about what you're doing when you're doing that. Yep. Okay, so Spoke is saying, a question specific to EQing vocals. I find it often challenging to choose the right unpleasant frequencies to cut out in vocals. That is a very good shout. Okay. The answer that I would give you for that is that you need to train your ears. That's the quickest response, is that the more that you train them, the stronger they are. You hear the one that is unpleasant and you cut it out. If there are lots of unpleasant ones, cut them all out. If there are lots of unpleasant ones, it probably means it needs to be re-recorded, right? That's the other thing, or that the sound design is not good in the first place. So, again, with mixing, we're not rewriting things. I think that there's something that I see with people when they're mixing is that you want to do a good job and you think that you need to work like really hard, like change stuff, show how much you've worked on it by getting into everything and fixing everything. And I say that because I used to do that, right? But now more so, what I would do is I would mix the life out of the track completely. So I think that the thing that I've learned is to listen. If we're sitting there EQing, we're not listening, right? So yeah, listen and adjust and change the things that you need to. And that's again another thing why analog processing I think is really helpful, or at least if you're mixing in the box, coming at it from an analog perspective, because you can't, you can only do so much when you've got all this gear, and it takes time and everything. So really getting too micro about it isn't really helpful. So I think that in the box, try to kind of zoom out and keep the big picture and don't overdo it. Yeah. So, and then, sorry, to the second part of what Spoke is saying, so if, when you're taking out unpleasant frequencies and then you're taking away characteristics of the voice. So, I think that again, that's, same thing, but the other part of the question to answer there is maybe don't do so much. 1 dB, we can hear it. So are you taking out 4 dB? Or if it's just a small amount, that's enough to make it edge out of our ears. Mixing is the art. Sometimes we're kind of obtuse with the way that we process, but quite often, these, particularly with taking out kind of unpleasant frequencies, quite often it doesn't need to be that much. Yeah. Okay, what else we got? Angela's saying, thinking about the mic, yeah, for sure. So stuff about the mic technique in the first place, absolutely, yeah. Cool. All right, let's go back and see what's next. So I wanted to also say one other thing. So why did I choose, now talking about vocal processing, as that's been like a topic of discussion a little bit, is like the kind of vocal chain. So I think that with the way that I approach things is that I have a short, sharp slap or micro shift or spatial kind of a shifter, should I say, which is actually shifting things in time, not as much in space. And if you want to get, again, like freaky with me, the time-space continuum is something that you always intersect with when you're mixing, because you can often make things have more space by moving them, shifting them in time in relation to the other elements. Boo! So thinking about that, it's not always using a reverb to make the vocals kind of have more space. It might be something else, like a chorus or like a microshifter, right? And that's why I talk about spatial and dimension processes, not just spatial stuff. So I'm using the micro shift slap to help the vocals to sit up on top, and then I want them to be lush, because the track is luscious, right? So then I've got, bigger hall reverbs and things like that, and I have a delay going into a reverb to get that washy feeling. But for me, having this kind of tight, short delay with the vocals and then something more washy is key for helping the vocals to sit in the mix, because that's often people say they can't get their vocals to cut through. So that's one thing, certainly. And people always like, working really hard with EQ and stuff, and maybe EQ isn't the answer. Okay. So a few of these things that I'm rolling through, I've already talked about these. So as I said with my parallel processes, I'm not going to use more than, like 5, generally speaking. So I've got a big verb. This is what I generally use. I've got a short vocal, a shifter or a slap on my vocal, something short. Then I have a wider, more luscious reverb, and then I have a delay of some sort, and I might have a special delay, a throw delay for transitions. Then I have an instrument ambience, which is kind of, again, this like vibe of whatever the song is. Like in this one, it's big and luscious and, sensual and whatever. And then I have a shorter space, either a delay or a reverb for my drum ambience. And that's it, basically. That's the way it rolls. What do you do? Let me know how you go with it. Okay, and then the final thing today, just to wrap up, is, well, the final part of it, which I'm not going to talk about today because this is when the mix starts, goes to the next stage, and we only have so much time, is then once we've kind of got all this stuff together, then the final thing is to build the narrative, is to play through, consider all of the processes that we've done, think about the transitions, and start to add automations. So for me here, I'd be doing some automations on my subgroups through my VCA, the yellow VCA master faders that you can see on the desk. And that's it. That's kind of all I have to say for today. So I hope it's been interesting, and just a few things to finish up on. Let's go back to this one. So just to summarize, how does, mixing, thinking about analog processes help when I'm mixing in the box? So the importance of signal integrity. So that means thinking about gain stage, thinking about unity, and setting that up first before diving into just compressing the life out of things, right? So that's the first thing. Number 2 is the conservation of resources. So in an analog studio, we only have so much. They all cost so much money, so you can't have endless supplies of them. And this is actually a really good, it's a good discipline, and it's a good, as we all know, limitations breed creation. Let's say, what do they say? What's the saying? Limitation is the mother of all. I don't know. Whatever. What's that saying? Let me know if you know what I'm getting at. Necessity is the mother of all invention. That's what I was saying. So, okay, so if you only have 2 or 4 compressors, you have to make them work. So you're going to work harder and think more about the way you should approach it. Okay, so conservation of resources, thinking about each, using the compressor that's appropriate, not overdoing it, not just automatically slapping on every Waves, compressor on every channel, not having 20 reverb buses, this is the other thing that I see all the time, every channel having its own reverb inserted directly on the channel. No, if this was, number one is that computer resources, number two is that you lose, where's the sense of the style or the collective experience for these sounds? Where do they live if they're all in their own little virtual kind of sound world? Anyway, yes, conservation of resources. 3 is time management. So again, we take time to set up the session. That takes a while. And then, again, studios cost money. So we have to think about how we're going to get through stuff. So for me, having a clear delineation of my stages and then having limitations to how long I can stay on those. So I could EQ and compress for weeks, but I'm only going to do it for 4 hours. Do you know what I mean, right? The thing is that happens in the box is that people do that. They compress, they sit with their EQ and compression and noodling on their mix for like weeks. That's not going to give you a finished mix and B, a good mix, right? Because you're losing your perspective. So getting into the flow and giving yourself limitations is important. Then again, maybe I should have had this earlier, but routing and signal flow as a creative choice. So rather than Ableton and Logic and other, Pro Tools doesn't do this, but most DAWs create the channel path for you. To me, I don't like that. That's part of my decision is where are the signals going to go? How am I going to add them? Am I going to compress them as one group or am I going to compress them separately? Do I want pre-fader, post-fader? All these things I want to think about because that's part of my creative process as a mix engineer. I'm making those decisions. So thinking about that also when you're in the box. And then, feeling the vibe. This is the other one, which it's easy to feel the vibe in a multi-million-dollar studio, right? I'm here, I've got all this great stuff around me. I'm tactile, I've got my hands on. So it's important for you when you're mixing in the box to do your best to get that sense of the vibe to the best of your ability. Maybe that means thinking about your monitoring in the room that you're working in and not mixing in headphones if you can avoid it. I think monitoring is a very important thing to think about. Obviously, where my loyalties lie with Atom Audio, amazing monitors. But also, other little things like getting a fader controller, having a one knob for simple gain and switching between mono and stereo and switching between different listening sources. A few little things to tactile to make you come out of this, just out of the box a little bit and come alive, I find quite helpful. Angela, big ups the A7X. Yes, amazing monitors. Okay, so that's basically it. Yeah, that is it. Thank you very much. I guess there's nothing more to say. You know me, I can talk for hours. So hopefully this has been helpful and interesting, and we can hang around for some more questions for the next 10 minutes or so. Let me know. We'll wait for a few minutes. Maybe I'll wait for a few questions and I'll play around with the mix a little bit more and then come back if we've got some questions. few questions rolling in. So we'll stay on the line for some people. If you got to go, peace out. Thank you for your time. And actually, let's take it to my the Zoom. Shall we do that? Yeah, maybe we'll do half an hour or so in the Zoom, but I'll just answer the questions that are here so far. How important is saturation and distortion in my mixes? Very important. I didn't really have time to kind of go there today. There's only so much you can cover, but saturation and distortion, I would say for me, more saturation. My Zoom ID, you'll find it on the program booklet to Pathways participants. More saturation for me, because I like the way that saturation also changes the tone. Well, the combination of that of subtle distortion and compression together, changing the kind of, God, it's hard to explain, isn't it? Saturation, the relationship of the textural response of the signal. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I use a lot. I often mix into tape, or I master, or I do kind of stem mixes into master tape. So that's a very important, and I also always record my drums to tape. That's a really important thing for me. Angela's saying, what reference monitors would you use? The Adams, of course, but do you put it in your car stereo, then headphones, and how do you approach the tweaking of the mix so it sounds good and lots of speakers? Well, that's a really good question. It's been a long road for me in terms of doing different things and mixing in different environments. Back in the day, I would do my mix and test it here and test it there and test it everywhere. And that's definitely has its benefits. And particularly if you're in an environment where you can't trust your monitors or your room, you'll need to do that. But I've found that the problem with doing that is that you get confused. Like, what should you be listening to? The car stereo or the studio or the headphones? Because they'll all bring out the different characteristics, particularly if the mix isn't right. So what's the answer? The answer is, if you're going to be a mix engineer, you have to invest in monitors. There's just no two ways about it. That's the fundamental thing, is you need to trust the sound coming out of the speakers, that it's flat and that it gives you an honest representation of the sound, number one. Number two is that you have a room that you can trust. So that means you need to do treatment in it. If you're interested to find more information about that, I've done a couple of talks with Adam Audio about this very topic, so you can check that out. But those are it's really important. And so for me, I know when I do my mix with my monitors in my studio, when it's finished, I can hear it. I know it sounds good. And then I know I will probably listen on my headphones, and then that's just to double check. But I really don't do much listening on other environments much anymore. Things like club mixes, maybe, if you don't have that low end and you want to hear how it's going to work in the club, I think that's something that is fair. But my focus would be on get those monitors and get that room so you can trust it. And then just keep on working and practice. Yeah. So Angela's saying most people don't have access to how do you make it accessible for the mainstream? Well, the Adam monitors A7Xs are under €1,000. And if you can't invest €1,000 at some point in your career as a mix engineer, you won't get any work, So you do have to make some commitments. Like a guitarist has to have a guitar. And I think that there does have to be that. There's no way around it. The only other thing you can do is, if you don't have your own monitors, you then rent out studios that have rooms that you can work in. And also you can do a lot with your room without spending loads of money. Check out my masterclasses on that, by the way, if you want to check it out. Yeah. Okay. So Kotoya is saying, do you have any recommendation for headphone studio monitoring? Well, Adam's HP5 I use. They're just there. They're really good. They're quite expensive though. So you want to see where you're at. The Bayer Dynamic DT 990s or whatever they are, they're very good. People love them. I used to use AKG 141s for about 10 years. I love them. Steffi uses these ridiculous ones that are amazing. I think they've probably got a pretty amazing price point as well. Audis or something. They're serious. They're really good, and lots of the big mix engineers that travel a lot use those to mix whilst they're flying, or what they used to do, I guess. But let me just say this: headphones. Go and listen to them. Listen to tracks that you know well. Same thing when you're buying monitors, is that give yourself some time to, because it's you. You've got to enjoy listening to them. Do they feel good to you? Can you hear everything? So you take a track that you know very well and you listen to them all and you think which one sounds most like the way I'm used to hearing it, and you trust yourself. That's basically the advice I'd give you. Cool. Okay. Are there any questions? I think that's kind of it. All right, everyone. That's a wrap. Thanks for staying with me. Sorry about the problems at the beginning. I will see you later. Ciao.